Have you ever been told you don't have a voice, only to wake up one day and realize the world can't stop listening? I leaned back into the plush leather of my dressing room chair, sipping lukewarm tea as the stage manager rattled off last-minute notes. Behind the curtain, my name shone in neon. The Quiet Hour with Eva Sinclair. Tonight was the premiere of a show born from my silence. I closed my eyes and let the memory carry me back. It started almost a decade ago on a rainy Thursday in October. I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree in comparative literature that promised nothing but part-time temp gigs and late-night poetry readings. My roommate, Jasmine, dragged me to a networking mixer at a nondescript hotel ballroom downtown. I hovered by the snacks table, crudités and $3 wine, while everyone chatted about startups, marketing funnels, brand partnerships. I felt like a ghost in my own body. Then he asked me to dance. His name was Ryan. He had kind blue eyes, and he smelled like orange zest and cedarwood. He took my paper cup of wine and guided me onto the dance floor of plastic tiles, where I stood frozen as the band played an upbeat jazz standard. "You're too quiet," he said, his voice a low murmur in my ear. I blushed and stammered an apology. He laughed and said, "That's my problem. I'm too loud. I need someone who balances me out." And so we began. He cracked jokes, regaled me with office gossip, taught me to laugh at my own awkwardness, and I, anticipating the right moment, offered a shy smile or a carefully worded opinion. In the beginning, I cherished our contrast. When he complained about the rain, I recited Neruda to appreciate its poetry. When he blasted Billy Joel on Sunday mornings, I introduced him to Debussy. We were cliché opposites. He, the extroverted salesman, me, the introverted bookworm. I believed I could bring him depth. He believed he could bring me out of my shell. Our first date was at a Japanese tea house, where I sipped matcha and shared lines from a haiku about fleeting beauty. He splashed soy sauce on his tempura, quoting lines from a sitcom. We laughed, spilling tea on the tatami mats, promising to meet again. A year in, he proposed, over scrambled eggs and toast, my favorite lazy Sunday breakfast. He slid a silver band into my palm without fuss, saying, "You're the calm I didn't know I needed." I said yes, tears of joy and disbelief mingling as I imagined a future built on balanced extremes. I imagined a quiet partnership that felt like home. But home can turn into a trap door. About 6 months before our wedding, he got a new job with a demanding travel schedule. Mornings became frantic goodbyes. Evenings, a screen between us as I coached myself to speak up. "Can you turn the alarm off? I'd like more time for dinner." "Let's go to that poetry reading." Each plea felt like a whispered echo against his relentless agenda. He listened, sometimes, but soon his yes turned into half smiles and muttered commitments he never kept. Then came the first blackout night. I was curled on the couch, half a step behind him in conversation, when he said with an edge I'd never heard, "You know, I can't keep chasing you around my own life, always borrowing your calm, your opinions, your availability. Sometimes I wish you spoke up more." I blinked, shock eclipsing sorrow. I'd spent months summoning courage to assert myself, asking for space, voicing fears. And he framed my voice as a problem. He was the storm. I was the stillness he couldn't weather. I nodded numbly, retreating into the shadows of our living room. Then I discovered the affair. I saw the private messages on his laptop, images too graphic to revisit, his laughter in hotel selfies with someone whose face I would forever associate with my own silence. I left without words. I left because there was nothing left to say. In the days that followed, I sank into a muted grief, drafting resignation emails to friends, writing letters that I never sent. I trusted you. I believed in balance. You used my quiet as a pillow for your ego. My voice felt like ash in my throat. I survived on coffee and the monotonous click of my pen on journal pages that doubled as unsent letters. Then, one evening, Jasmine burst into my one-bedroom apartment holding an open casting call flyer. Local news station needs on-air interns, need decent speaking skills and a good story. You should try. I scoffed. I'm too quiet for news. She pressed it into my hand. That's your hook. Everyone loves an underdog. Besides, they need voices like ours. They'll love you. I shut the door, but the flyer stayed in my palm. That midnight, I Googled the station, WNBC's Weekend Talent Search. They wanted folks to audition with a monologue, personal story, 60 seconds max. You have 1 minute to change your life, I whispered, reading the fine print. I stared at my reflection in the screen, a pale face, dark circles, eyes that once gleamed with words I had stifled. I tapped the link, recorded a shaky audition on my phone. Hi, I'm Eva Sinclair. I used to think my quietness was my curse until I realized it was my power. When your voice is a whisper, people lean in because they have to. Tonight, I'm leaning in, sharing my story, and asking for your ears. I submitted it, exhaling like a diver surfacing for air. For 2 anxious weeks, I fantasized about rejection and triumph in equal measure. When the call finally came, "Congratulations, you're in," my voice shattered like glass. Interning at WNBC changed everything. Weekends of chauffeuring anchors in borrowed suits, watching live broadcasts from the control room, heart pounding each time they cut to black. I swallowed interviews for plug pulls, lugged camera gear, and studied teleprompter etiquette. But the most valuable lesson came from Silent Voices, a modest segment on human interest stories featuring those who seldom spoke up. A refugee who'd learned English at 45, a child with autism learning to use AAC technology, a librarian championing quiet reading nooks in a city that never sleeps. My moment arrived when the producer asked for a fill-in host for Silent Voices. The usual anchor had a family emergency, and they needed anyone who could connect with interviewees on a deeper level. I blinked at him. Me? He nodded. We want your sincerity. My pulse hammered as I sat in front of the green screen for the first time, reading from a teleprompter. Have you ever had to raise your voice just to be heard? Tonight, we meet 5 people who discovered the strength in their quiet. My words felt strange, foreign, yet profoundly right. The segment aired to modest fanfare, but something shifted. Viewers emailed to thank me for spotlighting stories that often slipped into the background. Silent Voices got a bump in ratings. The station saw potential. They pitched a late-night show, The Quiet Hour, with my small segment expanded to a half-hour format, blending interviews, cultural commentary, and open mic moments for unsung talents. They called it the show for those who speak softly but carry big stories. The first contract arrived in my inbox 2 months ago. I sat before my laptop, hands trembling as I clicked accept. I pictured Alex, loud and self-centered, watching on a TV near the hotel minibar, realizing that the quiet woman he once dismissed was now the one people paused to listen to. It felt like justice, not revenge. It felt like finding my voice in a world that assumed it wasn't there. That brings me to tonight. As the stage manager signals 5 minutes to airtime, I slip into the hot pink blazer I'd chosen for tonight's premiere, my little rebellion against monochrome. I smooth my hair, glance at my reflection in the dressing room mirror, and whisper, "This is your moment, Eva." Behind the curtain, the crew cues up our opening sequence, a soft saxophone riff under a montage of host credits and cityscapes at twilight. The lights dim. My heart thrums in time with the music. I step forward, breath steady. "Good evening," I begin, voice warm, inviting. "I'm Eva Sinclair, and this is The Quiet Hour. Tonight, we meet the man who taught me to embrace my silence, and then used it as his silence blanket. Alex Matthews will join me for our premiere segment, When Quiet Breaks Open. Stay tuned." The lights snap up. I stand center stage, microphone in hand, the audience's hush rolling over me like a gentle tide. This isn't just my show, it's every unspoken truth finding its spotlight, every muted voice finding a stage. And it all started with those 3 words, "You're too quiet." The lights dimmed and a hush rippled through the studio audience as the opening credits faded. I stepped forward, the soft glow of the marquee spelling out "The Quiet Hour" in gentle neon reflected in my eyes. For a moment, I let the anticipation wash over me. I could almost hear the pulse of thousands of listeners leaning in at home, waiting for the moment when their quietest host would finally break the silence. I opened with a smile as warm as the stage lights. "Good evening," I said, and the applause rolled out like a welcome tide. "I'm Eva Sinclair. Tonight, our first story is one I never imagined telling on television, the story of how I learned that quiet doesn't mean powerless." I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I asked a man I loved once why he said I was too quiet. Tonight he'll answer, with me. A side door creaked, and Alex Matthews walked onto the stage. He looked smaller under our bright lights than he had in my memories. A man who'd once filled every room with his voice, now half hidden under the glare. He wore a grey suit that hung loosely on his frame, and his tie trembled as he climbed into the guest chair opposite me. For a breath, I saw the man I'd loved, eyes bright with plans, then the man who'd used my savings to fund his betrayal. The audience leaned forward. "One question before we begin," I said, voice soft but unyielding. "Do you know why you're here?" He swallowed. "Because I agreed to speak with you." His answer was brittle. The crowd murmured. I nodded and uncapped my pen, turning to a stack of photographs I'd placed between us. "Let's start with these." I held up the first image, a villa balcony overlooking an endless blue ocean, champagne at its edge. "This is Villa 4B at Costa Mar Villas," I said. "My former fiancé booked it for your business trip. He told me the cost would pay dividends in his career. Instead, the cost was my savings, our savings, used to pay for your week-long affair." The camera panned to Alex's face, pale as the photo's sand. Gasps and whispers rose from the audience. He closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "Eva, I'm sorry." "Wait," I said gently but firmly. "I brought receipts." I waved a printed spreadsheet. Each transaction, hotel, flowers, ring, was paid from a joint account you promised was for our future home. You chose a ring for her at Tiffany's over our plans. Do you remember that? The question hung heavy as stone. He opened his mouth, then sighed. "I messed up," he admitted. I lost sight of what mattered." The audience shifted, dividing between fury and sorrow. I clicked the next image, a screenshot of his Instagram story, captioned, "Champagne Kisses." "You told me you loved me," I said, "but you loved how I let you." Alex's shoulders slumped. I thought I needed someone quieter to balance me, but I found someone who applauded me instead. His words dripped with regret, but also with bitter self-awareness. I leaned in, voice gentle. Balance isn't one person swallowing their voice. Balance is two voices finding harmony. A ripple of agreement coursed through the studio. The third photo appeared, a ring box beside my own, unopened on my dresser. "You bought her a ring," I said. "You never sent me that receipt." The silence that followed felt like redemption taking root. Alex exhaled, tears glinting. "You were right. I was too loud, and you never got to speak." He looked at me with an honesty I hadn't expected. "I want to make this right." I held his gaze for a long moment. Words mean little now without action. I pressed a button and the large screen behind me flicked to a donation page. The Quiet Hour Trust. Tonight we're launching a fund for those whose voices have been silenced. By betrayal, by fear, by those who told them they were too quiet. Alex will match every donation I receive tonight, dollar for dollar. The crowd erupted into applause, the kind that shakes your bones and fills your heart. Backstage, after the cameras cut, Alex caught my arm. "Thank you for doing this," he said, voice trembling. I smiled, thinking of every unspoken fear that had led me here. "Thank you for listening." Over the next hour, we interviewed survivors of domestic abuse, tech workers who'd faced harassment for speaking up, and youth activists who used social media to amplify marginalized voices. Each story reminded me that quiet was never absence, but often a well of strength waiting to surface. We aired video messages from viewers around the country, teachers urging students to share their ideas, veterans reclaiming their stories, poets whispering hope into fragile microphones. At the end of the show, we returned to Alex. I looked into the camera. Tonight we learned that being quiet is not a weakness, it's a choice, but when we choose to speak, we can change lives. Then I turned to Alex. One final question. What will you do to ensure you never silence someone the way you silenced me? He swallowed. I'll help others find their voice, he said. I'll volunteer with your fund, mentor young people, advocate in my community. The audience rose to its feet, giving him a standing ovation I never thought he'd receive. When we signed off, the applause continued, an echo that carried far beyond the studio walls. Backstage, the production crew cheered, hugging me and each other. The ratings ticker in the control room spiked to record highs. Social media exploded with hashtag Quiet Hour trending, and news outlets covered our moment of reckoning with breathless headlines. For a few hours at least, quiet ruled the airwaves. In the days that followed, donations to the Quiet Hour Trust surpassed our wildest goals. Alex began volunteering at community centres, helping survivors rehearse their own stories for the mic. He sent me updates, photos of him guiding a young poet on stage, mentoring a tech meetup on inclusive speech policies. He never asked for credit, only for the chance to repair what he'd broken. Meanwhile, my own life shifted in ways I couldn't have foreseen. I received emails from viewers who'd finally dared to audition for creative programs, from refugees finding solace in quiet community spaces, from mothers teaching their children the power of speaking their minds. Invitations poured in to speak at universities, moderate panels on media ethics, host workshops on compassionate dialogue. People told me I'd given them permission to be heard, and that truth felt more precious than any applause. One evening, 2 months after the premiere, I stood under the same marquee lights ready for episode 2, an exploration of digital silence in the age of endless noise. The audience buzzed with anticipation, but my mind drifted, remembering a younger Eva who thought her quietness was her greatest flaw. Now I realized it was my greatest gift, and tonight, that gift would belong to every soul longing to find their voice in a world that sometimes forgets to listen. As the cameras rolled and the opening notes of our theme song faded in, I offered my signature smile, heart buoyed by the journey from too quiet to unforgettable. Because sometimes the loudest revolution begins in the softest whisper, and all it takes is one person brave enough to turn on the microphone.